iOS 26.3 release date. When Apple's next critical iPhone update is most likely to drop. If you're waiting for Apple's next major iPhone update, you're not alone. And right now, iOS 26.3 matters more than usual. Apple's software update rhythm has changed. Smaller updates have slowed down, and users are paying closer attention because security, stability, and upcoming features are all on the line. With iOS 26.2 now behind us and no sign of an intermediate update, the big question is simple. When exactly will iOS 26.3 arrive? Let's break down Apple's recent behavior, what's not happening, and why one specific date is starting to look very likely. Where we are right now. The last public update, iOS 26.2, was released on Friday, December 12th. That update focused mainly on bug fixes and security improvements, and since then, Apple has been testing the next version quietly in the background. Exactly 1 month later, Apple released iOS 26.3 Developer Beta 2, signaling that the company is moving steadily toward a public release. Normally, between a major update and the next point release, we expect a smaller patch. Something like iOS February 1st, 26. But this time, that update appears to be missing in action. And that absence is important. Why iOS February 1st, 26 probably isn't coming. At this point, the chances of iOS February 1st, 26 launching are extremely low. Apple usually releases minor point updates early in the week, often on Mondays or Tuesdays. By January 21st, there was still no sign of iOS February 1st, 26. No beta, no release candidate, nothing. That strongly suggests Apple has made a decision. Instead of pushing users to update their phones every week, everything that would have been in iOS February 1st, 26 is now being rolled into iOS 26.3. Apple avoids frequent updates unless something is truly urgent. And the fact that it held back tells us whatever issues existed weren't critical enough to demand an emergency release. In short, iOS 26.3 is next. No detours. What iOS 26.3 is expected to bring. Like most .3 updates, iOS 26.3 will focus heavily on stability, bug fixes, and security patches. But there are also signs of meaningful feature upgrades. One of the biggest rumored changes is end-to-end encryption support for messages between iPhone and Android users. If implemented, this would be a major step forward for cross-platform privacy. There are also signs Apple is preparing simpler migration tools to make switching between iPhone and Android smoother in both directions. Something users have been asking for years. For users in the European Union, iOS 26.3 is expected to improve third-party accessory pairing, making non-Apple headphones and devices connect almost as seamlessly as AirPods. None of these are flashy redesigns, but they represent Apple quietly tightening the ecosystem. Why January 26 looks like the release date. Now here's where the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Looking back over the last few years, Apple has developed a habit. iOS 16.3 launched on January 23rd. iOS 17.3 launched on January 22nd. iOS 18.3 launched on January 27th. All of these updates were released on a Monday, and all landed right after Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That same window lines up perfectly this year. Based on this trend, Monday, January 26 is the most likely release date for iOS 26.3. If Apple delays by a day, Tuesday, January 27th is the backup possibility. Apple loves consistency, and this timeline fits perfectly with its historical behavior. Another clue, Apple Creator Studio. There's another interesting detail that strengthens this prediction. Apple's announced a new suite of apps called Apple Creator Studio, scheduled to launch on Thursday, January 28th. It would make sense for Apple to release iOS 26.3 before that date, ensuring the system is optimized and ready for these new tools. Apple rarely launches major software without preparing iOS first. Looking ahead, why Apple wants this out of the way. There's also a bigger update looming on the horizon, iOS 26.4. That update is widely expected to introduce a major overhaul of Siri, powered by new AI capabilities. It's one of the most anticipated changes Apple has planned in years. To focus fully on that release, Apple will want iOS 26.3 shipped on time, clearing the path for development, testing, and marketing of the big Siri update. Final takeaway. All signs point to the same conclusion. iOS February 1st, 26 is effectively canceled, while iOS 26.3 is the next public release. January 26th is the most likely launch date. January 27th is the fallback. If you're waiting to update, you won't have to wait much longer. And if history is any guide, Apple is right on schedule.